Guys, welcome to guys, welcome back to Nananyana TV. We are in the Easter festivities. This weekend is Easter. So let's get ourselves updated with the weather as we enjoy this holiday. Today is Saturday. It started yesterday. So yesterday, today, tomorrow Sunday, then Easter Monday. That's the climax. That's where all the fun is going to take place. So let's see how the weather is going to be like during this weekend and how our activities are going to be planned. Guys, let's go follow our sister as she updates us on the weather. Come join me. Let's glue to the set and watch how the weather will be like. Have fun, but don't freeze. All right, come around and get updated.
This week we're going to see lots more spring sunshine, but some of us for a little while are going to be stuck under the cloud, and it's also going to be a bit colder as well. But a change is on the way, and where you do get stuck under the cloud, we're likely to see more sunshine towards the end of the week. But how long is this sunshine going to last? How hot is it going to get? And is this sunshine going to stick around for the Easter bank holiday weekend? That's lots of questions that hopefully I'm going to answer on this week's Deep Dive. Hello, my name's Honor Criswick. I'm a meteorologist and presenter here at the Met Office. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our content. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well. Give it a thumbs up now, just in case you don't make it to the end. Why not? So we're going to dive into the weather this week. We're going to look at a bit of a longer range forecast as well. But actually, the weather's pretty quiet. I was kind of struggling to find things that we could talk about this week. But I found a good few interesting things. So let's get underway. So firstly, let's take a look at this satellite picture. Firstly, let's take a look at yesterday. There's just nothing there. It was wall-to-wall sunshine for many of us. I think there was a bit of fog during the morning, particularly around North Sea coast. That's kind of the theme, particularly for the beginning of the week. But look at that. Lovely sunshine, lovely spring sunshine. It felt quite warm in that sunshine too. Obviously with the clear skies at night. I went to the beach last night. It did soon turn very chilly, didn't it? Even though it was quite a nice sunset. If we drag this forward to recently, it's pretty similar. There's just a little bit of cloud here. I'm pretty sure Alex referred to this yesterday as the Surrey sausage. We've got some cloud stemming up from Surrey all the way through into Wales this afternoon, but still dry and pretty much everywhere seeing a lovely day. So we've had lots of questions. How long is this sunshine going to last? It's the start of the Easter holidays for many of us. I know some people start next week. And people want to know. People are enjoying the weather and want to know how long it's going to last. So let's take a look. So I'm just going to switch this off, and I'm going to start off on Wednesday. And here we go. The reason for the settled weather, we've got high pressure that we all know and love, and it's a good high pressure as well. It's fairly clear, which has brought a lot of that sunshine. But obviously those clear skies overnight, it's been quite chilly in the morning. We've seen a really good range in temperatures from early in the morning towards the afternoon, which we're going to talk about a little bit too. So high pressure, yes. The only thing, if we follow these winds around in a clockwise direction, the way the winds turn around an area of high pressure, that does mean an easterly flow around eastern areas. And with easterly flows this time of year, we tend to get moisture moving in from the North Sea, dragging in some low clouds, some sea fog around eastern areas. But the sun's just about getting warm enough now that it's burning a lot of that back towards the coast. But unfortunately, it's kind of lingering there for a time, particularly on Wednesday. Eastern areas likely to see a lot of kind of low cloud fog moving into those eastern areas, and it's not quite burning back enough so that coastal areas do get stuck underneath the cloud with that easterly. And it's fairly similar if I jump ahead towards Friday as well. We've still got a little bit of an easterly. Notice that high has now shifted its way southwards, so it's central areas, parts of the southeast might start to see a bit of that low cloud drag in, but still high pressure across the UK, so it's going to be lovely weather at least over the next couple of days. Friday, once again, notice that shift, that high now further to the west, further to the southwest. And now if we follow those winds around, we've got a change in that wind direction. So more of a northwesterly, we say goodbye to the easterly and introduce a northwesterly. So that means we're not going to get that cooler flow of air around those North Sea coasts. We're going to see a change. So something a bit warmer across the country, really, rather than those cooler temperatures across the east, across the board, really. By the time we get to Friday, we're going to see nice warm temperatures, nice sunny conditions too. There's always someone to ruin it, isn't there? Look what we see here. As that high pressure shifts its way southwards, that's allowing a bit more mobility out from the Atlantic too. So if I drag this forward into Saturday, I'm afraid we start to see a bit more clouds, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle start to move into the north. But across the south, high pressure is still holding on. So across southern areas, it's still going to be rather nice. But by the time we reach Sunday, perhaps a bit more widespread and unsettled. But before we talk about the weekend, I just want to go into a bit more detail for the week. So if I turn this off, I'm just going to jump ahead to, I'm going to go to tomorrow morning. So here we go. So this is 10 a.m, so still kind of mid-morning, but you can see all this cloud across northeastern parts of Scotland, northeastern England, Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, parts of East Anglia. It even looks like that kind of low cloud is dragging into the kind of London area. Parts of Sussex and Kent may be getting some of that low cloud as well. So when you first wake up in the morning, if you're in any of these regions, you're going to look outside and think, oh, it's grey and it's cold. But anywhere else further west, you're going to see a lovely bright start, but it's still going to be chilly. But what we can see through the course of the day is that that sun does burn it back. It definitely burns it back away from kind of the far southeast. But by the afternoon, there is still some of that cloud lingering on. So that's where we're going to see those temperatures not going to get quite as warm. They're not going to see as much sun. We're not going to get quite as much radiation. So the sunshine is going to be limited, and so the temperatures aren't going to be quite as warm. And there's a bit of an onshore breeze as well. That's also going to add on to the wind chill. So I'm afraid these areas not seeing as quite nice of a day. But elsewhere, look, once again, very, very little cloud. Wall-to-wall sunshine once again, and it's going to be feeling warmer. Actually, temperatures are kind of on the up day by day. Now, it's similar on Thursday. I'm aware I'm stood in your way a little bit with this slider, but don't worry, we've seen your comments and we are going to move it. But once again, as I kind of pointed to earlier, that high pressure starting to shift its way southwards, those easterly winds changing a little bit further south. So kind of northeastern areas where that cloud set to linger, Thursday is probably going to see a bit more of an improvement. But kind of the Humber area, East Anglia, moving into kind of London once again and parts of the south, those dragging in that low cloud during the first part of the morning. But similar to Wednesday, we're going to see an improvement into the afternoon, but there's always that risk. There is always that risk of some low cloud lingering on. And then as we start to see that change in the north as well, some low clouds starting to move in there. Shetland, Orkney, for example, could see quite a cloudy day as we head into Thursday. Those temperatures not quite improving as much as other areas. But by the time we reach Friday, that kind of high pressure once again sinking to the south, many areas seeing a good deal of sunshine. This is when we start to say goodbye, really, to any of that low cloud moving its way through. But then, once again, lower pressure moving into the far north. So it's Scotland, once again, that I'm afraid are going to see the poorer conditions by the end of the week. More clouds, some rain and drizzle. It looks fairly light and moderate. This feature's kind of a waving feature, which means it's not really moving anywhere. So where we do catch the rain, it's probably going to be quite persistent rain through much of the day. But elsewhere, much of England and Wales once again seeing a very nice day, all thanks to that clear high pressure that we know and love. So that's kind of the general setup over the next few days. Let's take a look at temperatures then. This is where it does start to get quite interesting. So, drag that through to Wednesday. There we go. So, Wednesday straight away, you can see that temperature difference from east to west. Temperatures only really reaching 9-10 degrees. And with the cloud and the onshore wind, it's probably not going to feel that pleasant tomorrow. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But further west, we can see much better temperatures. This kind of is showing highs of kind of 15, 16, but it's likely we'll get into the high teens, possibly even the 20s, particularly across western parts of the Highlands. Could definitely, when that sunshine sticks around, we'll get a bit of a fern effect there. And there's going to be a good deal of sunshine as well. So it's going to feel quite warm. And you can see through Thursday, Friday, even into Saturday, those temperatures constantly on the up. But the main difference we can see is these eastern areas. So if we compare Wednesday, 9 to 10 degrees, jump over to Friday, more like, well, we've got kind of 18, 19 degrees. Temperature is probably going to be a few degrees higher than this. Good chance we could start to get to 19, 20 degrees where we see that more of the sunshine in eastern areas. So those temperatures are on the up, and where we see that cloud in the east, by the time we reach the end of the week, you'd have forgotten all about it and you'll be out there enjoying the sunshine, maybe sticking the barbecue on. So it's an improving picture for the most part, but obviously as we head into Saturday and that high pressure sits further to the south, that allows that Atlantic mobility to take hold, more cloud, more rain starting to move into the north. So those temperatures are going to drop, I'm afraid, across northwestern parts of Scotland. But nevertheless, it is an improving picture. And obviously we've had quite cold nights as well. Over the last couple of nights, we've seen a spot of frost as well. I think Scotland, we got down to about -5 last night. But then through the day, we're getting up to the mid to high teens. So that temperature difference between kind of early morning through into the afternoon, there's a really big difference there. And we can see temperatures through the week gradually on the rise. These are kind of towns and cities temperatures. So in those rural spots, it's always going to be a bit chillier there. So there's always a chance of frost. That's not uncommon for this time of year. So rural spots, clear skies, it's likely you could see some light patchy frost. But nevertheless, it's just going to feel that bit chillier. And then through the week, not feeling quite as chilly, but obviously under those clear skies still, those temperatures are still going to drop away. So spoken a lot about kind of max temperatures, minimum temperatures. Well, what's really interesting is the temperature difference, as I've already kind of mentioned. And it really always depends whereabouts that high sits, whereabouts our wind direction is coming from, whereabouts that cloud is lingering on, and it really changes day by day. So here we go. This is 24-hour maximum temperature difference. So this one, oh, here we go. On your left. This one on the left is for Wednesday, and this one on the right is for Thursday. So we can see here lots of these blue colours, so temperatures really really cold kind of compared to the day before, not really much improvement, not really warming up. But then if we compare Wednesday to Thursday, Thursday's temperatures are marked increase, particularly around those eastern areas. So this is when we start to see that high pressure shift. We see that change in wind direction and those temperatures really improving. We've got some quite dark red colours here. That's more than 10 degrees here, more than 10 degrees difference in temperature. So you're really going to feel that warmth through the course of the week, particularly in eastern areas. But then I'm just going to shift Thursday over to the left and pop Friday on the right here. We see a shift once again as that high pressure swings around, moves slightly further south. And it's across Scotland where, even though they're going to see the best of the temperatures at the beginning of the week, those temperatures are really going to start to decrease as we start to see that more cloud, more rain start to move through there. So it's a significant difference if you compare it Thursday to Friday, even in kind of eastern parts of Scotland. Not as much of a change, but it's still going to be much cooler if you compare it to Thursday. And even across the south, we're going to see a quite big improvement in temperatures too. Still lots of these kind of orangey colours, a kind of 5 to 10 degrees difference in some spots. So it's really going to change day by day where we see the best of the temperatures. But there's a good chance that possibly by Friday, Saturday, we could start to see temperatures in the low 20s. So it's going to feel, a lot warmer, a lot more pleasant. But in some areas, we're going to start to see a decline in those temperatures once again, particularly across the north. So I just thought that was really interesting, the comparison day to day and those shifts in temperatures through the week. So, what else was I going to talk about? Temperatures. Yes, I'm also going to talk about UV. At this time of year, it's really easy to forget, isn't it, that UV levels, they're on the rise, things are starting to get warmer, our kind of tilt in relation to the into the sun is starting to change. And it's very easy to think that temperatures mostly rely on or UV, is mostly reliant on temperature, but actually there's not a direct correlation between temperature and UV. I'm going to show that here. So this is temperature through the course of the year. Here we are kind of beginning of April, and you can see there is a steady decline obviously as we get to the summer months. The kind of peak is going to be where we see that summer solstice, so the longest day of the year, kind of, I think it's like beginning or middle part of July, and then we start to see that steady decrease as we head into winter. So that black line is the temperature through the year, but we can see UV through the year kind of peaks around around about middle of June, and then we start to decrease once again. So it's not necessarily the hottest temperatures that are going to give us the highest UV levels. What's interesting about kind of UV at this time of year, if we follow this line up here, so we're about there, what's that, 4-ish. And then if we follow this along here, it's kind of similar to the end of August, beginning of September, so more into the summer. So actually UV levels, they are increasing, and in the sunshine, it's really important to remember that, because it's easily, you could easily get burnt. UV levels this week are definitely moderate, if not borderline high. And it's similar beginning of April to what we could see kind of towards the end of August and September, but obviously people might be a bit more aware by then as we sort of move later into the summer. And the UV is going to be high this week. Or moderate, I should say, but kind of borderline high all across the country. We're seeing 4s or 5, particularly across Wales, parts of the south and southwest. We're in that moderate category. We're at 5s a lot of the time, but you only have to push up to 6 to get into that high category. And it's fairly similar through the week as well. If we take a look at some of the cities across the UK, obviously Lerwick, we're seeing a bit more cloud across the north, so the UV levels aren't going to be quite as high there, obviously slightly further north as well. But across much of the country, we're still sticking in those 3s, 4s, 5s. So those UV levels, they are on the up, and they are going to be high. So it's important to remember your sun cream. Don't want to sound too much like your mum, but it is important. UV obviously is an important thing that we forecast here at the Met Office, and it is going to be moderate through the course of the week. So it's an important thing to remember. Another thing actually with the nicer weather, I don't know if you've noticed, but the pollen levels, they're also on the rise this week. Let me remind myself what the pollen is. It's birch, alder and ash pollen. I've spoken to a couple of people this week and they've noticed the noses are starting to sniffle, and that's because pollen is also on the up. There's quite a few areas that are in the very high category, so Northern Ireland, Wales, parts of the southwest, but elsewhere it's high to moderate, so those pollen levels really starting to increase. So it's not just the UV, but it's also the pollen that's on the rise. And that's the same through the course of the week as well. Exeter across the southwest, it's staying very high through much of the week. Still a little bit lower up north, but elsewhere it's still kind of moderate to high, if not very high at times. So if you're a hay fever sufferer, now's the time to get your antihistamines out. But the weather can really affect the kind of pollen levels that we have. And we have actually recently uploaded a video onto our YouTube channel, one of our evergreen videos, describing all things pollen, featuring yours truly. And even I learned loads about pollen and different kind of pollen levels and how the weather can affect it. So we're just going to show you a little clip from that now.
If several warm days occur in a row, the heat can lead to a faster dispersal of pollen into the air, and once it's all been released, the supply can be exhausted. With no new pollen being produced immediately, pollen levels can drop significantly or even run out. This effect can vary depending on the type of plant, but in general, very hot weather tends to signal a decrease in pollen production. And what about wind? Well, then it all gets a bit more complicated. If the wind is too light, the pollen will barely get off the ground to be dispersed. But if it's too windy, the pollen gets blown further afield and thins out significantly. Different types of pollen will need different wind speeds for ideal dispersion, but birch pollen, for example, needs moderate to high winds.
So there we go, we filmed that just a few weeks ago. We really started to see that spring sunshine. We'll drop the link in the description if you want to watch more. And make sure if you do go check it out, give it a like as well. But yeah, it's really interesting how pollen can affect the weather. And obviously we're seeing those conditions as we head through the week, and that's why the pollen levels are on the up. So we've spoken a bit about the weather this week, temperatures, the change of kind of where we're going to see that temperature change. Spoken a bit about pollen. Now, I'm afraid to say, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but the area of high pressure that's been giving us the settled weather over the next few days, it is eventually going to sink southwards, as I've already mentioned. We're going to start to see something a bit more unsettled start to initially move its way into the north and then sink its way southeastwards. And that does kind of make its way into something a bit more unsettled over the weekend. But there's still a few little details, a few little uncertainties as we head into Sunday in particular. It's likely we're going to see some rain, some showers, possibly even some thunderstorms as well. So we're going to take a quick look at that. So on Saturday, as I already mentioned, that high pressure is still clinging on across the south. So there's still going to be lots of dry weather around. Away from Scotland, though, we'll start to see more cloud, more outbreaks of rain as this system starts to push through. So that's through Saturday. And it's later Saturday into Sunday that we're going to start to see more and more of this kind of more unsettled weather sink its way southeastward. So Sunday for many is going to be a bit more of an unsettled day compared to what we've had recently. Shift over here. So if I go even later Saturday, here we go. So by the afternoon, obviously, more cloud, some rain, some showers. We'll see an increase in the breeze as well, starting to move into Scotland, Northern Ireland. Perhaps a bit more in the way of cloud across the south as well, and perhaps just the odd showers are starting to clip the very far south. So starting to say kind of goodbye to those nice evenings as well that we're going to have this week. And then it's later Saturday through into Sunday that we see those kind of more unsettled conditions become a bit more widespread as well. So more showers, more clouds starting to move its way in from the west. Now, as I've mentioned already, there are some uncertainties there. I'm going to show, here we go. So this is something what we call the postage stamps. I'm sure you've seen these kind of things many times in deep dive. So this is from our global model. We run this model over and over, slightly tweaking the initial conditions each time to kind of give us an indication of the kind of weather we could potentially expect over the weekend. So this is for Sunday. This is midday on Sunday. So sorry if they're a bit small, but hopefully we can zoom in. Just going to draw your attention to this first one here across the southeast. This is kind of indicating that we're seeing a bit of a plume push up from the south, and we could potentially see some quite heavy showers skirt the south and southeast, possibly affecting London, Sussex, Kent, maybe even parts of East Anglia, some southern counties, Bournemouth, Southampton, for example, those kind of areas. So this is the control member, so a chance that we could see some poorer conditions move up from the southeast. But you can see the next two members don't really show anything across the southeast. So a chance that actually could just skip land altogether, push up through across the English Channel, perhaps push more into France and not really affect us at all. But you can see some of these members actually show something a bit more significant. So if we go all the way down to member 34 here, this shows something way more widespread. So more heavy rain pushing up into Wales, northern parts of England, perhaps parts of eastern Scotland there. And some quite a widespread unsettled day ahead as that warmer plume, that more humid plume pushes up across the south. But you can see a lot of the members are actually showing something small across the southeast, either nothing at all. So there's probably more of a kind of 80% chance that we'll see something across the southeast or nothing, and unlikely to be anything significant. But there's always a chance. We can't just completely rule out these other members that are showing something a bit more significant. It's happened in the past where it might not necessarily be the majority, and that's what's actually ended up happening. So this is kind of, once again, a little look into the kind of things that we look at here in the Met Office to kind of forecast what's to come, and the kind of different model members that we can look at. So just giving you an indication that, yes, on Sunday it looks like it's going to turn unsettled, more showery, perhaps even a risk of thunderstorms. And it's kind of marking that change into something a bit more changeable, particularly for the beginning of next week. And this is shown quite nicely here. So I'm sure you've seen these before as well. Red colours kind of showing weather patterns associated with high pressure across the UK, but the bluer colours associated with low pressure. So we can see starting off today, tomorrow into Thursday, red colours, high pressure, that high pressure sticking around. And then it's into the weekend, as I've just shown you, where we're starting to see something a bit more unsettled move through, particularly on Sunday into Monday. So that's when we're going to start to see that change. So I'm afraid the sunshine's not sticking around for too much longer. You've really got to enjoy it this week. And then by the weekend, more cloud, more rain, more showers. Now what you'll notice, so these are earlier model runs. So we'll find the latest model run at the top, and these are earlier ones. And what you've noticed is it looks like the general trend is that we kind of see a brief spell of these bluer colours, so a brief spell of the more unsettled weather, and then it starts to change a bit more into the red colours once again. So something perhaps more, this kind of the Easter weekend here, so perhaps something a bit more settled as we head towards the Easter weekend. However, notice that these earlier model runs, as we kind of move our way back, they did initially have this kind of the more unsettled spell just over a few days, but with the more recent model runs, it's kind of pushing it back. Notice this kind of diagonal shift. So as we head into Saturday, Sunday now, more recent model runs are indicating that actually we're going to see perhaps a slightly longer spell of more unsettled weather, and then maybe Saturday, Sunday, we could potentially see something a bit drier, a bit more settled. But if I draw your attention to these numbers, they're not particularly high. Saturday 46%, Sunday 54%. It's still kind of a 50-50 chance really of whether we see kind of something a bit more settled or a bit more unsettled. So that means, just showing you kind of from the postage stamps, kind of indications of high or low pressure, that our confidence as we head into next week, which isn't uncommon as we head further into the future with a longer lead time in forecasting, that our confidence in the model detail is kind of dropping. So this is a multi-model forecast confidence index, so taking into account all the models that we use here at the Met Office. So relatively good confidence as we head into this week with that high pressure, and then we start to see as we move through, particularly into next week towards the Easter weekend, that confidence drops quite dramatically. So it's difficult to say actually what the kind of weather's going to be, or where we're going to start to see that change as we head into next week, and what the kind of weather's going to be doing as we head towards the Easter weekend as well. So just to give you an indication really that this week's going to be settled, we are going to see a change, but the details around that change are still a little bit tricky to be certain on. But while we're here, I do just want to give you a slight indication of potentially what we could see. So I'm going to just switch this on. Do I want this one? Here we go. So if I head over to Easter Sunday, when I eventually click on it, here we go. So obviously there we kind of saw there is that indication of high pressure potentially, but as we know with high pressure, as we're seeing this week, it really depends on whereabouts that high pressure sits to the kind of weather we can expect. And notice these are kind of the top three potential signals at the moment for Sunday. Don't forget it's still about 2 weeks away, so there's a good chance that this could change. But just to give you a very, very brief kind of signal, Sunday the 20th, obviously if we start to see that high pressure build back in across the UK, then we'll probably see fairly similar conditions to what we've seen this week. Slightly cooler temperatures moving into the east, something slightly milder to the west, potentially fairly sunny. But obviously if we see that high pressure shifted slightly further west, that will give us a bit more of a northerly, so things slightly cooler, yes, but it could be relatively clear, so potentially some quite good conditions. But notice the chances of these are still very low, 10% chance, 9% chance, so it's still very early to say. We already saw from that graph that the confidence level is fairly low. And it's really going to depend on what happens over the next week or so, where we start to see that change from those unsettled conditions, what kind of change that is. And it really depends on that detail as to what the weather's going to be on Easter. So an indication that something more settled is on its way for the Easter weekend before we see an unsettled spell before that. But any kind of detail in the weather is a little bit tricky to do at the moment, I'm afraid. So I think that is pretty much everything that I was going to talk you through this week. So I hope you enjoyed. It's a fairly short one this week just because the weather is so quiet. Even globally the weather's fairly quiet. There's still some things going on. And obviously it's nice to enjoy the sunshine, but just make sure you're safe with those increasing UV levels. I've seen reports of some wildfires in Wales as well, so the kind of warmer weather, warm dry weather isn't always a good thing. So I'm sure in some places actually the wet weather into next week is probably fairly welcome and probably a good thing in some spots. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you enjoy the spring sunshine while it's here before the rain and the showers turn up next week. And don't forget, tomorrow here on YouTube, this is why you need to subscribe, we have Alex Burkhill's 10-day trend. So he can talk about the next 10 days, perhaps give you a bit more of an idea of what the Easter holidays are going to do, potentially a bit more into the Easter weekend as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that and he'll give you the details on those. But for now, that's it from me. If there's something you want answered, we have our Weather Studio live on Friday. It'll be me and Alex Burkhill, I believe, on Friday, answering any of your questions. That's Friday at 12:15. So make sure to stay tuned for that and leave any questions or comments you have in this video. And I'll try and have a look before Friday as well. And some of those we might be able to read out and answer for you too. But otherwise, I hope you have a lovely week. Enjoy the sunshine and I'll see you again soon.